keeps prices down far more effectively.
Comrade Karanja, His Excellency says you are unbalanced.
I'm a man in search of man. I was never in search of God.
In conversation tonight, my guest is Dr. Verghese Kurien, the man behind Operation Flood, who has been sometimes referred to as the milk mogul of India. It's Operation Flood that brings millions of Indians quality, hygienic milk throughout the year. And this milk is produced at cooperatives in over 7,000 villages, a model that has been replicated in China, Philippines, Indonesia, and several other countries. Dr. Kurien, perhaps you could outline for us some of the major achievements of Operation Flood.
Operation Flood is a project that has had so far 3 phases. Operation Flood 1, 2, and 3. This project came into being because there were huge mountains of surpluses building up in Europe, and European community did not know what to do with this mountain. The sensible economic solution is to set fire to it. But unfortunately, public opinion in their own countries will not permit them to burn food when half the world is hungry. So then the only other solution is to give it away. Now if you give it away to Burundi, only 1 pinch is got rid of. The mountain will not disappear. So then they had to find a country large enough who can absorb these surpluses. And obviously, we in Anand, in the dairy board newly formed, began to worry over the implications of these surpluses finding its way to India. In our judgment, some kindly European gentleman was bound to turn up in Delhi. He would not go to China because even though it is bigger than us, the Chinese don't drink milk. So obviously it has to come to India. And so we said he is going to come up in this capital of our country called Delhi and meet my minister and offer him 100,000 tons of milk powder free of charge. The only thing my honorable minister will ask him is, what about the freight? And I think this kindly European gentleman will say, well, we'll bear the freight also. And then the minister, receiving such gifts, what will he do with it? He will make it back into milk and distribute it. And of course, he will have to start distributing in Delhi because center of the universe is Delhi. Now the net result of all this will be that the price of milk will drop, the incentive to produce will go, and this surplus dumping in our country will ruin our dairy industry and do just the opposite of what NDDB was created to do. So we discussed amongst ourselves, and before this kindly European gentleman will come here, we put up a proposal that we will request EC to donate to us as the dairy board these commodities, and we will receive it. And in order to recombine it, we will build 4 major dairies, one each in Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Madras, each of 400,000 liters per day. Recombine this and market it and pick up the consumer's rupee. Now, if I've got $1 of commodities, what I will pick up from the consumer, because the price of milk here is higher, would be $2 equivalent in rupees. So I'll get the rupees with which I will create Anands around these metropolitan centers. And we decided to create 17 Anands around Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Madras, with a total membership of 1 million farmers. And that was Operation Flood 1. And once we implemented this project and these Anands came up, then came the next problem that the mountains still remained. So the World Bank came into the picture, and I must here pay my tribute to the head of the World Bank, at that time Mr. McNamara, who came to Anand to negotiate with me World Bank's participation in Operation Flood. He said, how can you exclude us from a project involving millions of small farmers, marginal farmers, landless laborers. The whole World Bank is meant to help them. So, Kurien, please take some of our money. And then I laid down conditionalities, which he happily accepted.
What kind of conditions are these?
Conditionalities which, when it should come and what rate it should come, at what price I shall sell it as milk. I will sell it as milk at a price that will not depress production here. And all the conditionalities that govern the development of dairy, how they should give me a free hand, how I don't want experts to turn up from Washington who has not seen a buffalo to tell me how to do this, as World Bank is wont to do.
How long have we been dependent on this the foreign inflow, and is that likely to be an ongoing factor?
No, it was in Operation Flood 1, it was entirely commodities. Operation Flood 2 was commodities plus World Bank, plus 100 crores from the Dairy Board. In Operation Flood 3, it was commodities, World Bank money, plus 300 crores from the Dairy Board. And when Operation Flood 4 starts, it will be 600 crores from the Dairy Board. In other words, we can do a project of the same size as Operation Flood 1, 2 and 3 with only our internal resources. So, what we did was to use these donations to convert the Dairy Board into a financing agency, which is capable of doing this ad infinitum.
How far are these figures arrived at because of special concessions that you may have received from the government?
There were no concessions. There was only the point was that I could receive these commodities, and since it is gifts, there will be no import duties on it. There was no other concessions as such. You know, gift commodities, no country gives to India unless India agrees that that will not be taxed.
A major achievement of your efforts has been not only in ensuring quality supply of milk, but the manner in which it has impacted the farmers, the producers of milk.
The main point is in dairying, you probably are aware that in India, the average farmer has 3.5 acres of land. He owns 1 or 2 buffaloes at the most, or cows. So, dairying has been a small farmer occupation. But more importantly, we cannot conduct dairying in India in such a manner as they do in advanced countries, that 1 hectare of green carpet is given to each cow to graze in. You know, we just don't have the land. There is this tremendous pressure on land by humans. And therefore, clearly, the Dairy Board of India must produce the milk of India from what is left after man has eaten, not by diverting land from food production to feed production. Therefore, clearly, the type of animals that we have to depend upon are the low producing animals, not the 40, 50, 60 liter production animals which need a lot of fancy foods and must be treated like prima donnas, but our own cows and buffaloes which now give 1 liter, which if you feed them a little better and the farmer will take care of it, will give us 2 liters and 3 liters and 5 liters. So, we have to develop our dairying without creating a competition between man and beast for land and its produce. And so, our type of dairying is a small farmer occupation, and that is why it is turned out to be India's largest rural employment scheme.
How were you able to persuade the farmer to come on board? What were the elements?
You see, farmers will come on board if they perceive it as to their benefit. Here is a cow that he owns, which probably gives 1 liter. If I can persuade him to take a few elementary steps to make it give 2 liters, and that's not difficult. If you pack the animal, instead of 1 liter, it will give 1.25 liter. If you give it a glass of water to drink, that will become 1.5 liters. If you give it a handful of grass, it will become 2 liters. And with these simple things, you have doubled India's production. Because your production per animal is so low, it is easy to double the production, triple it and quadruple it. In the last 21 years, India's milk production, which was stagnating at about 20 million tons, is now 60 million tons. India has emerged as the 2nd largest milk producing country in the world, and within the next 5 years, it will be the largest.
In your championing of farmers' rights, as it were, you recently opposed the GATT agreement. I think there was a feeling that in some senses you've been resisting the advent of multinationals in India. How far is that true?
Liberalization, globalization, and so on. I am not opposed to it so long as it meant the reduction of the profile of government, the reduction of expenditure of government on itself. If it meant that by liberalization, government will shrink and will get out of sectors where it should not have been in the first place. If that is what was meant by liberalization, there is no one who would object it, everyone would welcome it. But unfortunately, as you are aware, under liberalization, it has not been possible for government to reduce its own expenditure. It has not been possible for government to reduce the number of people it employs. And all that it has done, it has liberated industry without having liberated agriculture. And in other words, I oppose the sequencing of liberalization. If I were in charge, I would have liberalized agriculture before I liberalized industry, because I am one of those who believe industry has exploited agriculture. The terms of trade between industry and agriculture has been adverse to agriculture.
In what ways?
There are industry can be easily liberalized. In the case of agriculture, perhaps you may not know, in Kerala, for example, a farmer who is growing paddy is prevented by law from producing anything else, even today. There is the Land Ceiling Act. There is innumerable Mandi tax, various other regulations that restrict and hamper farmer getting freedom to use his land as he thinks best. Therefore, it is not, the difficulty in agriculture is the large number of farmers involved, and unfortunately because of this, the politician wanting to have some influence in shaping what the farmer does so that he can get his vote. Industry, he has only to please so that industrialists fund him for his elections. And so I have objected to not liberalization per se, but the manner in which it was done here. Secondly, globalization and so on. What it seems to imply is there are no national boundaries. What it seems to imply is we are all citizens of a globe. Now, how can we liberalize? How can we put everything under open general license? Anybody can import anything. When you know very well the advanced countries like Europe, like America, subsidize their exports of dairy products to the extent of 65%. And now if you say they can come into India with their products, then what will happen to Indian agriculture, Indian dairying? So where it concerns essential commodities, there is such a thing as food security of the nation involved. Food is often used as a political weapon to beat you to submission if you depend on others. Therefore, in essential commodities, you need to seek self-sufficiency. Even though pure economists may say, what is there is one globe, you can always buy it. You cannot always buy it.
In some senses, you have sought simultaneous to create cooperatives which function more or less independently, but yet the Dairy Board is under the larger governance of the government and its influences. How much of an obstacle has the bureaucracy been to your efforts?
Well, there has always been serious problems from the beginning, because the Dairy Board came into existence because the Prime Minister of India, at that time Mr. Shastri, decided to come to Anand. We had invited him, but he decided to come one day earlier, and he made this very wonderful decision that he will not stay in my house as it was planned, because there were no guest houses, but he would rather go and stay in a village as the guest of a small farmer. So the Chief Minister of the state called me and told me this is what the Prime Minister desires. And then naturally came the security of the Prime Minister, not so serious those days as it is now. But nevertheless, a couple of hundred policemen would have to be deployed. So I told the Chief Minister, this is no way, you entrust this security to me. To which the Home Secretary said, he will not agree. The Prime Minister's security remains the function of the Home Ministry, Home Secretary. But he understands my point, and he's my friend, so he will see to it that we arrive at some settlement. And the settlement was that there will be no policemen in the village, other than two plainclothesmen, whose only job is to see whether any stranger has come into that village and to take him away. and there is no other security. And the Prime Minister came, he ate with the farmer and his family. I was, of course, not there because I had no role to play. After which he walked around the village. He went to farmer's house, sat with him and his wife and children, talked about their life, membership in the co-op, how their co-op functions, what do they get as payment for milk, is it satisfactory, what is the cost, and so on. Then he would say, may I go and see a Muslim farmer? So he went to a Muslim farmer's house, sat down, talked to them. Then he said, are there Harijans here? So he kept on doing this till 2 o'clock in the morning, and he had to be ordered to bed. Then this Prime Minister finished the job came to my house, stayed with me, inaugurated the cattle feed plant for which he had come to Anand. And before he left, he called me. And what he said was very, very significant. He says, Kurien, I spent a night in a village because I wanted to study this success of Anand from grassroots level upwards. We have 100 dairies in India, all of which are unmitigated disasters. They do not satisfy those who sell milk to it. They do not satisfy those who buy milk from it. And this is the exception. So I decided to spend a night in a village to find out what is the secret of the success of Anand. Now I looked at the soil, good soil, but not better than the Indo-Gangetic plain. I looked at the rainfall, 30 inches of rainfall, 3 months of the year, nothing special. So it is in most parts of India. I looked for vast availability of fodder and feeds. I don't see anything special. I looked at your animals. In fact, they are worse looking and yielding less milk than the animals I remember in my native place in Uttar Pradesh. They are bigger animals and yield more milk. I looked at your farmers, good people, as farmers always are, but not as industrious and hardworking as the Punjabi farmer. And yet you have this miracle here. I said the one difference here, the secret, if it can be called that, is that this dairy is owned by farmers. It is managed by a board elected by farmers. They in their wisdom has appointed me as their professional manager because they felt professional management was required to run it. They wanted someone whom they thought they could trust. And having appointed me, they allowed me the freedom to run this dairy factory and to expand it and to build it and to do whatever I felt I needed to do, subject of course to the directions of the board who met once a month. And so here was a combination of the enormous asset of India, its people, the power of its people, the combination of that power with professional management, which people like me represent, giving that power some direction and thrust when everything becomes possible. What you need is structures that is commanded by the people, not structures commanded by the bureaucracy, strengthening the bureaucracy rather than the people. And this is the secret one. Then it is that the PM said, if this is so, this can be done everywhere, and not only in milk. I said, yes. Then Kurien, will you now, from now on, work for India rather than for Anand? And we will create a structure, whatever you want. And I give you a blank check. So the structure created was the National Dairy Development Board. And at my insistence, it was set up not in Delhi, but in Anand, because I refused to come to Delhi. And I had said that I will accept no salary from government, I will remain an employee of farmers. That was also agreed to. And so the dairy board came into existence. Now, what I had not bargained for was the antagonism this generated in Delhi. The Ministry of Agriculture, particularly its dairy division, felt that why does the Prime Minister create a dairy board? Are we not doing our job? This is an insult to create this dairy board. So they saw to it that the check I had, which I brought here to cash, bounced. I got no money. And the minister at that time was a very fine man called C. Subramaniam. He couldn't find the money for me. And the money I asked was 30,000 rupees. And he couldn't find that also. So he said, Kurien, can you set up the Dairy Board of India without this money? I said, of course I can. Then he said, please go ahead and do it. And so that is the dairy board we set up without government funds, as a government institution. And today it's one of the richest of institutions in India, with assets totaling 2,300 crores, which will make it one of the 5 largest business organizations in the country.
You've been with the board for more than 27 years. You almost didn't stay on in the job. You had wanted to leave at one point when you were still very young.
Not really. Once I went to Anand, and because I was a Christian, because I was a bachelor, because I was a meat eater, I couldn't get a house. So the only place I could stay was the garage of the dairy. That's where I lived. And starting from there, once I felt I was wanted, once I felt there were things I could do to help those less fortunate than me, then obviously I have found my job. So I have never left.
And since that time, of course, you have the board has begun, and your initiatives have gone into the areas of edible oils, of chocolate, of butter, and a whole range of initiatives.
What we are trying to do is, there is nothing that Indian talent, Indian managerial skills, Indian scientific knowledge cannot achieve, given half a chance. Unnecessarily, we bring in foreigners to give ourselves a boost, even for making elementary things like toothpaste and whatnot. It is unnecessary. I believe there is a role for foreign capital, foreign know-how to come in, and that should be in high technology areas. But to bring them in into low technology area, to manufacture idlis and doshas also, I suppose there will be collaboration tomorrow. This is absurd. So I am one with the point of view that in consumer industries we should be more choosy in permitting foreign capital, because the outflow of foreign capital, they take back the money they invest in the first 2 years. Thereafter it was a negative flow of foreign exchange, so we should not be permitted.
You mentioned that just before when we were chatting before the interview, that you've been in the job for 27 years, and you're here in Delhi asking to step aside. Do you feel complete about your initiative, and do you feel that the initiative can continue without your ongoing involvement with it?
You must understand that I am tomorrow 74 years old. Not tomorrow, maybe a few days later. And I have worked fairly hard. And I would not have done my job if I have not trained my successor. The first job of anyone is to locate, identify his successor and to groom him. Now I have been doing this for the last 20 years, and government has been very generous in continuing me for 27 years. No, I don't think there has been any chairman of a public undertaking who has held office for 27 years. So having held this office, yes, I am coming from the Minister of Agriculture, with whom the discussion was my successor. I said my successor is, my job has already been part of my job. I have trained my successor. I only want to make sure that you will not find someone else. So, after all, it is government's privilege to appoint whoever they want as the chairman. I was only requesting that the one I have groomed for the purpose should be posted. And if, since it was a woman, if she does not measure up, government may change her. But give her a chance. And you will probably find she is better.
Well, assuming the government accepts and accedes to your request, what plans do you have for yourself?
At the age of 74, one does not have any plans, do not make much plans. But I happen to be the chairman of the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation. I am the chairman of the National Cooperative Dairy Federation of India, which involves 8 million farmers. These are positions I shall continue to hold for a year or two more.
What about yourself personally? Are there any sort of gratification, satisfactions for yourself that you still seek?
What other satisfaction can you have than a job where you are trying to help those who are less fortunate?
Well, and a job well done. Thank you very much indeed.